welcome to my YouTube channel or my podcast. I'm your host and guide, Will Caminada, and I'm here to help you awaken, heal, and expand your consciousness. And today, it's a conversation episode, and I had the pleasure to talk to Karen K. Karen is known as the Fairy and Mermaid Whisperer, and she has been featured on TV, radio, magazines, and newspapers. She's the author of 2 Oracle decks, Messages from the Mermaids and Oracle of the Fairies, published by Hay House UK. And Karen connects to the elemental world, bringing through ancient wisdom from fairies, mermaids, and unicorns into our human realm. And it was a really fun, lovely talk. We talked about fairies, mermaids, whales, how you can connect with the nature spirits. And this is also sort of an extension of one of my episodes that I talked about the 9 different types of spirit guides. And I mentioned a little bit about the nature spirits, and this is a more extensive information about them. If you enjoyed this show, please share it with your friends, subscribe to my YouTube or my podcast, and make sure that you hit that like button and leave your comment with your best takeaway. Enjoy this episode. Hello, Karen. Thank you so much for being here on the show.
Oh, hi, Will. Thank you so much for inviting me. It's such a pleasure to talk to you.
That's my pleasure. And I'm really excited to talk to you about the nature spirits, fairies, and unicorns, which is something that I've never talked about here on the podcast. And just before we get to the juicy stuff, I'd love to know a little bit about your story and how you got here where you are today. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about your spiritual awakening. Were you always connected with spirit? How is that for you?
Well, my earliest recollection of connecting with spirit and primarily fairy energy really was when I was a young girl. My parents had separated and I went to live with my grandmother, and she had this beautiful garden, and I just have these memories of being in the garden with her. And she loved roses, and she was always pruning the garden, and the rose petals would fall down, and I would gather them up and I'd put them in a pot and add some water, mush them all up, and then I at the time believed that I was making perfume for the flower fairies, but it was actually rose water technically. And I would leave it out overnight, and the next day I would go to check and it would always be gone. And I did this several times. So I knew that the fairies or some kind of beings were taking and approving of the perfume that I was leaving for them. So that was my first understanding that there was something more to what this physical earth was showing me. My ego wasn't developed at that point because I was a young girl. And I would see them, I would perceive them as little points of dancing light, just tiny little lights piercing through the veil. I didn't know that that's what was happening at the time. I would just catch them out of the corner of my eye. And that stayed with me my entire life. And actually, at one point, when I got to my teenage years, I think most people go through a kind of rebellious stage of their life. And I was thinking, well, maybe there's something wrong with my eyes, and that's why I'm seeing all of these lights, and maybe it's not fairies. And I went to the opticians to have an eye test, and I didn't say, I think I'm seeing fairies, can you make sure I'm okay? I just said, can you check my eyes out? And I had 20/20 vision, perfect vision. And that for me was a sign. I knew that I was seeing fairies. Not that I really needed that scientific confirmation, but it was for me. And they've just stayed with me. And the connection has got stronger and stronger. I also connect with angels as well. And I feel like I've got a connection with I can't even say the word, extraterrestrial beings as well. I feel that star energy. I've always been drawn to that, but that isn't as strong as my connection with the fairies. And obviously the fairies are really grounded and connected to the earth. The angels are a bit, you know, in a different dimension, and the extraterrestrials are even further. So it's a real wide range, really.
Yeah, wow, that's a beautiful story. Thank you for sharing. I love what you said about, you know, as a kid, our ego is not that developed and we just believe, right? We just have that like admiration and we're just in awe of this world, right? And I love that that stuck with you, that stayed with you.
Yeah.
And it's something that I wish we didn't lose, right? Because when we were kids, we're just like, it's just a different world.
Yeah.
And then as you grew older, what was your practice, or what did you do to sort of maintain that connection?
I don't feel like I actually did anything really consciously, but just briefly going back to this childlike space where I don't know what happens when we grow up. Maybe it's the responsibilities. I'm not sure what it is, but I've been very fortunate to retain that childlike wonder and connection with the world. And every time I see a rainbow or anything, a bird, anything at all, I'm like, wow, it's like the first time. And waking up every day, it feels like such a blessing and a gift, and I'm so grateful. And I know it is hard to maintain that, with especially when all the challenges of being an adult come in. So not everybody's able to do that, but most of the time I am. So I do feel like that's a real blessing. I have never really done anything consciously to keep my connection with the fairies. I think I've just been in this open, innocent, nature-loving space, which has magnetized them to me as well, because it is definitely a two-way journey. We can't just summon fairies. We can do our best to create a space where they can come to us.
Mm-hmm.
But basically, they have egos too, in a different way from humans, but they definitely have egos and personalities. So they'll only come to us if they want to. And for whatever reason, they probably know that I'm super passionate about the environment and I love the land, and fairies are guardians of the land. So there's an automatic rapport there anyway. So it's just something that's evolved, and it just feels very, very natural.
As a child, did you like fairy tales, cartoons, Peter Pan, Little Mermaid, Disney pictures, or not?
A little bit. It doesn't. Yeah, they're actually. You say, oh, I wish I had the book. I've got the book somewhere. There was a book that I remember reading when I was very young called Cinderella, and it was the Ladybird book of Cinderella. And in this particular book, she had 3 magical gowns. There was a pink one, a blue one, and a white one. And I just remember that always stuck with me for some reason. And the fairy godmother and all of this magic, I that stayed with me. And then it was a few years ago when I first released the Oracle of the Fairies deck. Actually, one of my friends is a dress designer, and I asked her to design me this dress, and I drew it out in my basic drawing skills, which aren't that great, but she was really good and able to interpret it. And when I said, actually, I want 3 dresses, because I had 3 things to do. I think I had a TV thing and something else. And I asked for 3 dresses. And then when I got them, I realized that subconsciously I tried to recreate the dresses from the Cinderella book, but it was real and I had them and I've still got them now. So it's almost like I'm embodying that magic. And even though there are no fairies per se in Cinderella, the fairy godmother is more like a kind of witch, wise woman type of being, but she does have a wand and she does create magic. But yeah, that's one that's really stuck with me. I don't remember lots and lots of fairy tales, but I definitely remember the Cinderella one.
Yeah. And today, do you think that these stories um, these tales, do you think that there's some truth in it, or not so much?
I think there are elements of truth in all stories, and usually it's some kind of wisdom that is passed down through the generations, because before TV and all of these things in the past, people would have shared their stories through tales, through stories, through the spoken word, and through visual paintings and things. So I do believe there are elements of truth. A lot of them are warnings. And some of them are actually quite dark, some of the fairy tales, some of the stories behind it.
The Little Mermaid's real story, not the Disney story, is quite dark.
Yeah, there's a lot of darkness in a lot of them. But interestingly, I don't, my personal experience of connecting with fairies and mermaid energy and unicorns doesn't remind me of any of the stories that I've ever written. The experience of them from me personally has been very, very different. It's just like meeting a friend, but from another dimension.
Yeah. I remember as a child, I love the Little Mermaid Disney movie. But I think for me, it's just like, it just reignited this passion, this love that I have for water. Like, I've always been obsessed with whales and sea creatures. So I really believed that that was true, that there was a mermaid and those beings were friends. So I guess at the core, I think that's what it does, right? It just sort of reignites something that perhaps your soul already knows, right?
Yeah. And we're taught as well, if you can't see it, if it isn't a physical thing, then it's not real. People demand proof and all of these types of things. But when you're experiencing these other realms and beings from these other dimensions, it isn't always a physical thing, but it doesn't make it any less real. And I got asked a question the other day that was quite interesting, that I'll just mention now, was like, how do you know what is your imagination and what is your experience? And all I could say to that is basically, it's something that as you develop your spirituality, as you grow in human years and have more experience, you get to know the sound of your internal dialogue and your own imaginings, and the difference between that and the reality of actually experiencing and perceiving another being. And they present in very different ways. So I think that just it's just an inner knowing. Yeah. And I'm not ever out to prove or to try and convince anybody of anything. We can all believe and do what we like, but I share my story because people want to hear it, and it's real for me. But I'm not attached to anybody believing it. And some people will say, oh, that's a load of rubbish. And some people will say, oh, wow, I've had experiences. Do you think it could be? I get a lot of people like that approaching me. So I've just kind of come out of the fairy closet, if you like, and just like sharing my story, and because it's real and it uplifts people as well.
Yeah, I love that. Would you say that they somehow also work through our imagination as well, like giving, visions and whispering things?
Yeah, that's one of the ways, because fairies are very creative, and so they'll come through in whatever way they can, and the imagination is such a wonderful way. So I get a lot of my visions and inspirations, and for the cards as well, they kind of worked with me to show me these visions. And so if you have ever seen my fairy oracle cards in particular, the details are so specific, because it was just like this download of visuals. And I'm not an artist in that sense. I'm an artistic person, but I can't really paint or draw. So to be given these visuals and then try and write it down and pass it on to the artist that I was working with was a real interesting experience, but she really got it and really understood what I was trying to convey. So it was like I don't really like using the word channeling, but it was like I was co-creating with the fairies. They were giving me inspiration and ideas and kind of putting them in my mind or showing me them. I was perceiving them, and then I was putting them through my own filter and interpreting them in writing. So it sounds quite complicated, but it just flowed. It was a fun thing to do.
And you manifested that in the physical world, right?
Yeah.
Would you like, I see that you have it in the back. Would you like to show one picture or one of?
Oh yeah, let's just have a little, I'll do a little shuffle and do a little card for the collective. And yeah, so on the back of the cards there are little golden fairy keys. I'm just gonna pull and see what comes up. Oh yay, believe in magic. That's perfect. I love it. I don't know if you can see that there.
That is beautiful. So everybody who's watching, there is a beautiful card of a fairy. Because I usually post the video on YouTube and the audio on podcast.
Okay.
So if anybody's listening on the podcast, jump onto the YouTube to see the beautiful picture.
Well, I can describe it as well, because this particular fairy, she's the fairy of the Northern Lights. And I've never seen the Northern Lights physically, but I've seen pictures of the Northern Lights and videos, and it always feels so magical. So she seemed perfect to be on the Believe in Magic card, which is exactly what we're talking about now. It's having that belief, but it's also beyond belief. It's a knowing that it's real. And her message is, she's the fairy of the Northern Lights, and she says magic is all around us. We are a part of nature, so we must be magical too. There's no separation. We are magical. My whole body is tingling as I'm saying that.
Yeah,
we're magic.
Yeah,
we're already magical.
Yeah, I felt that in my heart. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and maybe that's what we needed for the collective, is just that knowing. Let's establish that the elemental spirits are real, right? And I guess everybody who's listening or watching this, they probably believe 100%, and now with this card 110%, because that was the time that we needed. I love that. Thank you so much for sharing, and we'll talk more about your oracle card at the end so that people can get them. So let's just get a little bit of a structure here. They are considered elemental spirits or nature spirits. What do you call them?
Okay, so this is something that it's really easy. I call it like a fairy rabbit hole, because there are so many schools of thought, academic schools of thought, and you've got to call them this and you can't call them that. And for me, they are guardians of the land. They are nature spirits. They are also elementals. There are so many human word labels that we can place upon them, but it's always about the intention with what you're saying it, because a fairy or fairies, it's a generic term for nature spirits, and of which there are many of them. You know, you can pixies, elves, gnomes, sylphs, all types of different labels, and it just represents a different type of energy. Like the gnomes would have a more really grounded energy. It will be very, very different. But it's like I said, it is a bit of a rabbit hole. So I just use the word fairy or fairies, and then people know, and the spelling of it as well. The fairies care not for human words. They care for our hearts and how we perceive them and how much we love and care for the planet. From my experience and my connection with the fairies, that's what they share with me.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's really clear. But what would you say are like the main types You mentioned fairies, gnomes, what else? Maybe unicorns.
Yeah, unicorns are interesting because they take themselves so lightly. They can go between the heavens, the divine, the angelic, into the realms of fairyland as well. They're often depicted in fairy art. You'll see a fairy on a unicorn or a unicorn in fairyland, but you'll also see a unicorn with an angel, so that they really do go between. They're like their own, it's like they're omnipresent. They'll just go wherever they like because they are so light. And it is an interesting one because people that are more into the angelic side of things will claim the unicorns in that realm, but people that are in the fairies will claim it in there. But actually they're free and they go between all, so they can connect, weave in and out, if you like. Yeah, they're like their own I don't know, roaming beings of the spirit world, really.
Yeah. These types, that's something I say, the types of spirit guides, they intersect. It's not like, there is a category and then above that, it's a different category. That's a very human way to perceive them, right?
Yeah.
Maybe that's a silly question, but would you say that mushrooms are a kind of nature spirits?
It's not a silly question at all. I don't think any question is silly. If a question is coming from your heart, then I just think it's never silly. And sometimes people don't ask questions because they think, oh no, that's a silly question, I shouldn't say that. But I think any question that's coming from a pure place should be asked. And I think mushrooms in particular are like a route into fairyland as well. It's a whole other subject really, but they are a way, they're definitely connected into that realm, because you also hear of the fairy rings that are made from mushrooms as well, and they're coming from the earth. I love mushrooms. I don't mean that the psychedelic ones, they're great too, but I just mean that I love eating mushrooms, the earthy mushrooms. I just like that direct connection with the earth. And of course, just a warning to everyone, don't just go picking any mushrooms, because some can actually be quite deadly to humans. So I don't recommend doing that, but it's certainly an interesting topic to explore. I think it's called mycology, the study of mushrooms.
Yeah, it's because one of the types that I mentioned is plant spirits, which would be, ayahuasca, San Pedro, because they really have an effect on your emotional, mental, and spiritual being. And I guess with the magic mushrooms too, right? It has an effect. It's calling you perhaps to experience something and heal something. So that's why I thought maybe they are in between nature and plant spirits, although they're not really plant.
Well, I don't see a separation actually, because from my understanding and my feeling is that fairies are the fairy energy or the spirit energy or the life force, whatever label you want to put on it, is with every living thing. Plants, trees, crystals, mushrooms, everything that's living and growing as a part of the earth. So it would almost be naive to think actually mushrooms and these other medicine plants don't have them, because they are I've connected with the spirits of ayahuasca without consuming it.
That's what
Mother Gaia, and I've had these incredible, my whole body's tingling again now. I've had these incredible journeys and visions without, the extent of my consumption at the moment is green tea and maybe a bit of chocolate, so I haven't consumed it, but you can connect energetically to these because they're growing on the planet with us, so you don't even have to consume them.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's what you just mentioned. We are nature, right? We are part of the nature. And so you mentioned that they are the guardians of the land. So would it be fair to say that the mermaids are the guardians of the sea?
Yes. Yes, that's how I perceive it. And I would say one of the types of guardians of the sea, because again, there's mermaids, there are other beings. People see the whales and the dolphins and other spirit beings of the ocean to be guardians, and they all are. They're different, but they're all there. And for me, for whatever reason, the mermaids connected with me and I connected with them, and so they are definitely guardians of the sea, and they're really good to work with, to help with emotions and heart healing and going deep into stuff, in almost like they're the shaman of the sea. The mermaids are almost, because they go deep and they go into that the dark places. And dark doesn't mean bad, it just means going into the depths to get to the root, to get to the core of things that maybe are hidden and you're not even aware of, and they can help to bring it up to light, bring it up to the surface. So they're really wonderful beings to work with.
That's amazing. What would you say to anyone who perhaps would like to connect with the nature spirits? What practice can they take, or what advice would you give that's something a little more practical that they can do in case they're just feeling that connection and they just want to go a little deeper?
Yeah, I get asked this quite a lot, and I'm actually currently creating a course on connecting with the fairies. So there will be a connecting with the mermaids part of that course as well for people, and that's coming in the future. But it's because I'm just asked so much. So a really basic, simple way, let's say we want to explore a possible connection with the fairies, is to go out into nature. If you're lucky enough to live near nature, find a tree. If you can't get outside, some people can't get outside, then you can do all of this in your mind with your imagination. Or if you've got a house plant, you can be near that plant, because there will be a living fairy energy with that plant, because it's with all plants. And if you don't have a plant, then you can just look at an image, or, as I said, use your imagination. But ideally, get out into nature, find a tree that you feel drawn to, that if you just kind of let yourself feel, and usually it would be a more mature tree, a bigger tree, an older tree, a wiser tree, and always ask permission to connect with a tree. Trees love being hugged, but equally they love being asked, because they're a living energy, different from us, but they're still a living energy, and there can be this attraction or repelling energy. So it's being sensitive to that. And you can just ask, may I come near you? May I sit with you? And you'll know, you'll just feel a yes or a no, or you'll just know instinctively. Usually, more often than not, it's yes. They love to interact with human energy. And then you would sit with your back against the tree. And I want to say meditation, but that word can put people off. So let's just say being present, being in the moment with the tree. And something very simple that you can say either out loud or in your mind is, fairies, fairies, come to me as I sit beneath this tree. Easy, isn't it? Mm-hmm. And just something simple. You can make up your own way of expressing that. But I just like, what I find is when the fairies connect with me, it's very often in a kind of rhyming, it just comes through in rhymes. And I thought, well, why is that? And it's because it's easy to remember when it comes through, and it's playing. They like to play in all dimensions, with everything, with words, with music, with sounds, with feelings. So I think that's why it does come through in rhyme. And then you would just basically sit and be present for as long as you wish, and just be open and receptive to any changes. And they could be really subtle changes. You might just sense an animal or an insect or something acting in a slightly unusual way, a bit different from normal. you might feel something. It might be really overt, and an acorn might just fop you on the head, or which then fairies can be very playful and a little bit mischievous and naughty. So that sort of thing can happen. If they want your attention, they will get it, especially if you're open to that. And sometimes they'll just be scanning you and checking you out from a distance. So you might not have any immediate experience, a sensation or something. But when you put out that call, it's like an invitation. They will know, they will have seen you, and they'll just be checking you out. Like, what does this human want? Because fairies are naturally and understandably wary of humans because of what present company excluded, but the damage that humans do to nature, chopping down all the trees and the rainforest and all of these things. So it's understandable that a fairy is going to be wary of a human because of that reason. Even though we know that we love nature and we wouldn't do that, they have to just check out our energy. And so they'll kind of read our hearts, they'll scan our hearts to feel, does this person love nature as much as we do? Because they're the guardians of nature. So we have to meet them somewhere. And another way to connect with them would be to show them in your physical, practical actions. If you're out and you see some litter, pick up the litter. When you're at home, what household chemicals are you using? What are you putting down the sink? What are you putting down the toilet? Because all of these things go into nature. So be more conscious, aware, and maybe incorporate more natural products into your lifestyle. And even though it sounds, well, that doesn't sound very magical, but practical is part of, we've all heard of practical magic, haven't we? So it is almost like being practically magical. And that will bring you on a kind of similar frequency to the fairies. And it is just a waiting game, because if they don't want to connect, they won't. But if they do, they will. They're not there for our beck and call. We can't just summon a fairy. I mean, you might summon something pretending to be a fairy, or you might summon a mischievous fairy. You've got to be very respectful and careful. Not in the sense, we don't worship fairies, we don't worship these beings, but we respect them as energetic equals of another dimension. And we can form friendships with them if we want to. And it is a very fun journey. But once you open that fairy door, like I have, like they've literally been with me my entire life, but I love it because I love that element of just magic just happening in unexpected places at unexpected times. So it is a wonderful journey.
That's beautiful. And I loved how you put it, because yes, my question was about like something practical that we can take. And I think that helps us humans to make sense of things as well, because we have a good vision of what we can do, connect with the trees. And I'm sure people already connect with nature, but now they might have like actual tools to connect with them. And I feel like people that are already connected with nature, and they're into recycling and sustainability and all of these things, they are probably prone to connecting with these things already, right?
Yeah, in a natural way. It can just happen with you without trying. I don't remember really trying to connect with them. It can just happen very, very naturally.
And I loved that you mentioned that they are playful, right? It's something that I mentioned in the video that I did about the spirit guides, that I feel and I believe that one of their main roles is to remind us to play more, remind us that not to take life so seriously, right? Yeah. So what are some of the ways that they play with us? Do they hide my socks because they disappear?
It's almost like you've just put out an invitation now to them. They'll be like, oh, you want to know how we play with you, do you? I mean, they can be super, super playful. And some of the ways might be, they can it depends how close your connection is with them, but they can move things around. They can make things disappear and then reappear. And it's like, I know I looked there. I know I lost my keys. I looked there a million times. And then I went in the kitchen and I came back and there they were. And it's like, okay, you could say, well, that could be another spirit. It could be, yeah, it could be. But when you're connected with fairies and you know that that's the sort of thing they might want to do to attract your attention, it doesn't happen all the time, but it can. And it doesn't have to be keys. It can be anything at all. I've got I had a fairy necklace, and it was a golden key, and it was a gift, and it had wings on it, and I loved it, and I do love it. And I have not been able to find it for about 3 or 4 years. And I've even asked in my deck, there's all different fairies. And one of the fairies is the lost and found fairy. And she helps to find things, and you would ask her to help you to find something. But sometimes they just take stuff because they want to, because it's pretty and it's shiny, and they just, I don't know why. And the other things that they can do is, like I mentioned earlier, like an acorn could drop on your head, or if you're out in the woodlands or something, a bramble could catch your clothes. You might even trip up. They can be a little bit mischievous. I don't feel like they're evil, although they can be darker energies, but I'm not really sure if they're not the fairies that I'm connecting with. I have encountered those type of energies, and I just choose, I don't vibrate on that level, so I don't connect with them. And I feel like now I've got this whole kind of, I was going to say a team of fairies, but I'll say a flock of fairies, like all different energies that come in at different times for different reasons. So there's definitely more than one around me, but they are all of a kind of higher vibration. And some of the old school kind of academic type fairy people might disagree with that, and that's totally fine. But a really good example is, have you heard of Brian Froud? And he did an oracle, or the fairies oracle, and he's a prolific artist. He's worked on the Dark Crystal, he's worked on Labyrinth with David Bowie. He's a designer, a concept designer, and an incredible artist. And he and his wife did this deck, and in the deck they had these beings of light, and they're fairy beings, but they are transmuting. And he described, and he's known as like the fairy godfather of fairies, certainly within the UK and Europe. And he's known in America and all around. But he said, one of my first conversations with him was, about fairies and what are the singers. He called, as in singers. And the images are just so, you can just about make out wings, but they're kind of energetically formless. They're just light, but they're coming rooted from the earth, but they're going upwards. And he said, fairies can transcend. So that just shows not all, there might be some mischievous fairies, there are definitely love and light fairies, but there's all different, same as humans. Yeah. We're all on these different levels of spiritual evolution. It doesn't mean that one's better than another. And like we were talking at the beginning, there's not this we tend to want to put things in hierarchies, and this is better than that. And it all just is, and it all is valid. And all the experiences, the nice ones and the not so nice ones, are all valid and needed, especially from the perspective of a human, which is why we're here to have all these. Well, I believe one of the reasons we're here is to have the experience of being human. And that means experiencing everything. Yeah. The multidimensionality of it all, right? Yes. I love that. You mentioned that there was the lost and found fairy. So is it like they have, like, kind of like the angels, you have different fairies for different purposes? Yeah, I don't think that there is a fairy that sits and waits for you to lose something or find something. But I do feel that certain fairies will hear the call and think, that's a job for me, I'll come in and help with that. So they'll take on the form of a lost and found fairy. Because the other thing about fairies is they're wonderful shapeshifters. So they can come in and take on any form, and they can present to you in any way that they wish or not wish. And so, like, if if there was a specific thing, like we'll use the lost and found fairy as an example, any nearby fairy, if you put out that call, if they feel drawn to take on that role, then they will. But I don't think they're just sitting there waiting for someone to lose something and find something. But I think there are definitely certain types of fairies that will be more aligned with doing certain things.
Right. And to connect with the mermaids, how would you say we can do that? Maybe go into the water.
Well, that's the most obvious, but it isn't always the most practical for everyone. I mean, yeah. I say I'm blessed. I do feel very blessed, and I say I'm lucky, but I chose to live where I live because I'm 5 minutes away from the ocean. I'm 5 minutes away from the woodlands. So I've got everything right there. I can just walk out of my home and I'll be in this environment that I need to be in. And so ideally, yeah, if you want to connect with mermaids, going to the sea is the number one. But there is another way, lots of other ways, but a really, really simple way, because I'm all about keeping it real, keeping it simple, keeping it accessible for everyone. I don't feel that anyone could or should be excluded from having these connections if they feel it in their heart and want to. So a really lovely way to connect with the ocean, with the mermaids, is I've got it here actually. This little, I use this. It's for people that can't see, it's a little ceramic ocean coloured heart, and I'll put a few drops of water in it. And you can use any vessel. You can use a cup. You don't, just whatever is to hand. I put pure water in it, so it will be filtered water, just a few drops, and then I'll put some sea salt or salt in it. And then I'll mix it around, and then I'll put some on my finger, and I'll put it on my third eye, and I'll say something like, with water and salt to symbolize sea, may mermaid wisdom reside within me. Ta-da! So simple. And it immediately, as soon as I've done it, I'm feeling that energy coming.
Yeah, I'm going to do that because I have this shell.
Yes, that's perfect. Perfect. Yay. I love it. And it's so nice because you don't have to be at the ocean. It's not easy for everyone to be at the ocean. But that's just a super simple way. You're creating the energy of the ocean when you put water and salt together. And remember, we all start our lives as mermaids. And you might think, huh? Because we all start our earthly journey with a tail. When we're in the womb, we all have a tail, and then that develops into legs, or, whatever happens in that chemical factory.
In the water too, right?
Yeah. And when we cry salt water tears. Now, why is that? Why are we full of salt water? That's another connection to the ocean. So we've already got this inherent kind of physical connection to that. So as soon as you connect to the ocean, you are by default connecting with the mermaids and the mermaid energy.
Oh, that's so beautiful. I love the ocean. I guess it's all about setting the intention too, right?
Yes.
Go to meditate or have whatever practice one has. It's just having that intention, doing a little ritual. I love what you said, make it practical, make it simple, and set the intention, and then surrender to the practice. But I do feel like I don't live so near the beach, and recently I went to one, and we stayed at a beach house, so we were really close to the ocean, and I would go to bed listening to the sound of the oceans, and I remember just looking at it and sleeping with that sound and just wanting to connect with the beings in the ocean. And I had a really vivid dream with a whale, and it was beautiful. And now I can go back to that same experience, so I don't need to be there. But I do feel like when you're close to the ocean or to nature, it can sort of enhance the experience.
Definitely. Yeah, because you're in it, so you kind of can't avoid it, because you're literally in that whenever I go to an ocean, I have to put my feet in the water, or at least put my hands in the water, and I'll put the water on my third eye and just connect energetically. But just being near it, you can't avoid it. It's just not that you'd want to, but it's so beautiful. But like you say, you can call on that experience wherever you are, and it's not like you're reliving it, it's like you're revisiting it, because it's there, it's real, and it's just held in this space in your heart, in your mind, in your soul, and you can go there whenever you like and have that feeling again, which is so wonderful.
Yeah, well, that's lovely. I'm enjoying this very much. I have some final questions, that I call fun and deep questions.
Ooh, nice.
So you can just answer whatever comes to your mind.
Okay.
Go for it. So the first question is, what brings you joy, Karen?
Waking up in the morning. And I know that sounds so simple, but every day I wake up, I'm like, another day, I'm in my body, I've woken up, I've got the gift of another day on this planet, on this earth. So that brings me a lot of joy.
It's beautiful. Hypothetical question. Mm-hmm. If you had to choose between being a mermaid or a fairy, which one would you choose and why?
That's a mean question. And I'll tell you why, because I do actually identify as a mer fairy. And I feel like I have a mer fairy human, actually. And I feel like I'm half fairy, half mermaid, half human. I know that's three halves, and I'm not very good at maths, but I can't choose. I won't choose. I refuse to choose one over the other, because equally they are both me in me, and so I couldn't ever choose one over the other.
That is absolutely fair, and it goes back to what we were talking about. We are multi-dimensional beings. We don't have to choose. We just have to embrace all the multi.
But it's a good question. You put me on the spot there, definitely.
This is also a hypothetical, maybe a little bit hard, but I like asking this question. So imagine that all the books in the world were going to be destroyed and deleted forever. And if you had to save one book, what book would you save?
I'm going to say the book that has just popped into my mind, which is The Magic of Findhorn. And I don't know if you've ever read that, or I'm sure some of the people listening would have possibly heard of it. But have you heard? I'll just briefly explain. So Findhorn is a place in Scotland. I think it's on the Isle of Forres, Forres. I think that's where it is. And I read this book back in the 80s, in 1980, probably a lot before a lot of people were even born who are listening to this. But it's about this, it was kind of barren land. It was just sand. And the people there, and it's a true story, they worked with the elementals of the land, and they grew the biggest prize-winning vegetables and fruits on this soil that scientifically was tested to have nothing in it whatsoever. So they were directly working with the elementals to bring about, and the story of this, and it still exists now, this place. I think the lady's name was Eileen Caddy, who founded it, and she's written a lot of positive affirmation books and things. I'm not sure what she's doing now, what dimension she's in at the moment. But anyway, that book, The Magic of Findhorn, is something that really ignited something within me, and it's a true story, and it's about the practical application of working with fairies in a physical way, not an airy fairy way, but practical, growing food to survive. So I really love that book.
That's amazing. That sounds really interesting. Actually, I have a question that's not part of the fun and deep question that just came up while you were talking, because you mentioned that was in Scotland. Is there something in the lands of the UK and Ireland that just has this magical thing, because I mean, I'm Brazilian, and I've always been drawn to the British culture, and especially when I went to Ireland as well. You know, with all the leprechauns and the superstitions that they have. Is there something in the water or in the land?
Well, yes, there is. There definitely is. I can't really put my finger on it metaphorically or practically, but there is definitely something there. However, I also founded a magazine called Fae Magazine, FAE, which is Fairies and Enchantment. And I remember doing a feature in that, which was about fairy experiences, fairy beings from around the world. So literally every place around the world will have its own fairy stories, but they may not be called fairies. They may be called something else, but they all have stories of these nature connected beings. But there is something super magical about the UK, Scotland, Ireland, the Celtic islands. Definitely, yeah, there is.
Another thing that came up to while we were talking is Mount Shasta, because it is believed that the survivors from the Lemurian continent sort of migrated to the west coast of the Americas, and they live in Mount Shasta. Maybe that's not like your area of expertise, but do you think that that area is also an area that is, you know, has a lot of these elemental beings?
Oh my gosh, yeah, I do. I know. So it isn't my area of expertise at all, but I know just from what I've seen and what I've heard and friends that have visited there and feel drawn to there, that there is definitely something going on there that's pretty magical and vast and quite enormous. So I could definitely believe that is what's happening.
Yeah, maybe one day we'll go there and we'll check for ourselves.
Yes.
Next question. What is the one thing that people would be surprised about to know about you?
Ooh.
Other than that, you're a fairy.
There's more than one thing, but back in my kind of earlier, younger days, I was like in a punk rock band, and I'm a musician, and I used to be a session singer, and I've sung for some big bands that probably people haven't heard of today, but I've got a whole musical career that I used to have, and I do still sing now, and I actually do fairy and mermaid music now, but it's not in the same way. But I used to go out and gig, and I played the bass guitar and was a lead singer and had all spiky hair, and I'm also one of the European punk postcard girls. I used to have big red spiky hair. I'll send you a picture. And that normally, because it's so different from who I am now. And then I've got one picture of me dressed as a fairy when I was like a gothic punk. I had fairy wings. So it's always been there. But that is like, people are like, wow, you did that. I'm like, yeah, it feels like a former life. And that's just one thing that might surprise people.
That is amazing. Please do send the pictures and I'll put it here on the video.
I will.
That's amazing. I'm also I've been a session singer too, done gigs.
Oh wow.
Yeah. I think that singing and music is just, you know, out of this world.
Yes. Yeah, I agree.
So this last question is called 3 Truths. So imagine that in many years from now, you're about to make the transition from this physical realm into the spiritual realm, into another dimension. And then all of the books, all of the decks, all of the things that you've created in this life will be deleted. And you have a piece of paper in front of you with a pen, and you can write 3 truths. And this is what's going to live on from your life. This is like your legacy. Your children, or the people in the world will read that and will remember you. What would be your 3 truths?
I mean, I literally, the vastness of that question I'll just throw this little question in. What? Like I could feel my chair, my seat literally getting hot. You know, you talk about the hot seat. Have you heard that expression? Like on the hot seat, I can feel that energy. Okay, because I was really with you and I was like, I don't want to think about my transition. I've got so much to do. But you said many years ahead, so I'll take that. Well, the first thing that I would write on the paper would be love.
Yeah.
Let my legacy be love. And there's another two words. What would it be?
It can be a sentence too.
Be kind.
Mm-hmm.
And be truthful.
Be love.
So truth, kindness, and love.
Yeah. Be love, be kind, and be truthful.
Yes.
Love that.
Love. Always love.
And just before we wrap up, I'd love for you to tell us first how people can connect with you, and also about your decks. If you can tell us a little bit how we can work with it, where we can find it.
Yeah, of course. So what I will say is I'm happy to give everyone a free little fairy meditation. If you want to go to my website, join the newsletter, it's totally free to join. The meditation will be totally free. You'll receive an email with a download. And that is on my website, which is karenk.co.uk, karenkay.co.uk. I'm on all social media. I've just joined TikTok as well, which is really fun. I don't know why, I'm really enjoying that platform, but I'm on Instagram. I post quite daily, and it's Karen K Fairy, quite simply, on all platforms. And on TikTok, it's Karen K Fairy Official. And the cards, they're available in all good bookshops. And I like to encourage people to go into an actual physical bookshop and get them, because these businesses really need our support at the moment, and it's so easy to go online and click a button, and you can do that as well. You can get them on all the usual kind of online places, and as we've been talking about, Oracle of the Fairies, which is my first deck that I did, and then my deck about the mermaids, which is called Messages from the Mermaids. And yeah, they're both available. I'm actually working on another deck, but it's top secret, so don't tell anyone. And the courses that I said I'm working on. So the best way is to join my newsletter, and then you'll just get the updates. And I do daily card readings on all of my social media platforms as well.
Wow, that's very exciting. And I'll put the links in the description so that people can find your website. Thanks for offering the free gift. I'll put that link in the description. And I'll put the link to your Oracle cards as well. For people like me who are not in the UK, I might have to order from a digital store.
Oh, right? Yeah, of course. They are available all over the world, by the way, as well. But yeah, it's fine to get them online as well. Of course, it's easy, isn't it? But if you do have a store near you, then I would always encourage that as well. But yeah, they're available all over the world, which is incredible. I'm so blessed and grateful.
That is amazing. So I'll put all the links in the description. And Karen, I want to acknowledge you for your joy and for adding more color and more glitter into the world. So thank you so much for your being. Thank you for shining your light, and thank you for your time.
Wow, thank you so much to you as well for inviting me to share. And I've really enjoyed this conversation, and I've really enjoyed those uncomfortable questions as well. I love it. You've kind of just put me on the spot, and I do actually really enjoy that. So thank you so much as well for sharing your virtual space with me.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. Much love. Thanks for watching or listening to this episode. If you would like to learn more about Karen's work, please visit her website, www.karenk.co.uk. You can also find the free meditation that she mentioned in her website, and you can also follow her on Instagram. As usual, I'll put all the links in the description. And if this episode has brought you value, please share it with that one friend who will love to listen to our conversation, and make sure to subscribe and like it and leave a comment. And as usual, keep shining your light, keep your heart open, and let love lead the way. I love you. See you in the next episode.